Boneless Ribeye. This is actually a dry-aged Primal. The difference between this and a prime rib is the bones are taken off. If the bones were left on this, it would be an export rib. But in this state here, it's a boneless ribeye. I think it has the most flavor of any cut. But it also is very unique in that the meat will transition dramatically from one end to the other. On this end, it's going to look exactly like a New York strip. This is the loin end. On the shoulder or chuck end, it's going to look altogether different. And each subsequent steak will vary with the amount of fat. But again, it's actually a superb piece of meat. I'm going to go ahead and trim it down so I can show you in real time what I'm talking about in the visuals. And then the other end would be closer to the chuck or the shoulder. And just in those two pieces, you can see a dramatic difference from one end to the other. This is basically one solid piece. This one is a combination of muscles that have progressed as the piece of meat moves from one end to the other. So I'm going to take the external edge off. So the boneless ribeye, at this stage, now we're ready to cut individual boneless steaks if we want. However, we're going to do something kind of fun with this piece. There's a variation on a theme with this cut of meat that's very rare, and you'll see why as I cut it. It's expensive to do because of the amount of shrink in the waist that you have on this. But we're actually going to cut what's called a rib cap off of this. It's the spinalis muscle. You can barely see it here on this end. It's just starting here. But on this end, it's quite predominant. You can see it right here. It's a spectacular piece of meat. It's got tremendous flavor, absolutely unbelievable flavor. The reason it's so scarce, if you will, is twofold. One, on a small piece of meat like this, when you take it off, the remaining loin, as I'll be able to show you, is quite small. You'll see what I'm talking about when I pull this off. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually looking for the natural seam between the muscles. And it's a good example of the way that I was learned to butcher, to actually find the individual muscles and separate them that way rather than using a saw. So this piece here, that's the rib cap. That would be the spinalis muscle. And then the remainder would be the ribeye fillet. But what's happened is you can see all this fat that's normally in the ribeye can no longer stay because the piece of meat is not large enough to be able to carry it, if you will. So for example, everything that I just took off there normally go as part of the steaks when they were cut. So in this fabrication, it's lost. Now for the spinalis. So this is the trim spinalis. As you can see, this is the thicker end and then it tapers down to a vanishing point. Most of these that you'll see are from Wagyu. Wagyu is a much larger animal than is the Holstein, and so the components will be much larger. It'll be probably twice as thick. And so what restaurants that would serve it, what they'll do is they'll cut it actually steaks from this end. They'll do something else with the thin end, tartare or whatever, but they'll cut steaks off the bigger end. The problem with the Holstein, because it's a smaller animal, and you can see how what's left of the eye on that end there. So we found a very, very cool way to do it where we tuck the smaller end in and then we roll it. Because what we're trying to create is less of a steak and more of a roast. It almost has the appearance and shape of a filet mignon. So here you have the results if you wanted to create a rib cap roast, a spinalis, and the remaining ribeye fillet. the obvious problem, as you can see, is that all of this here would normally be sold either as part of the roast or as part of the steaks. And so to pull this off and create these, naturally your numbers just go through the roof. So it becomes a very expensive proposition. It's worth every penny. It's incredibly good, but it's expensive.